Micah Parsons has officially requested a trade, and he means it. Here are the landing spots, and the top 3 teams on this list really separate themselves from the rest, in my opinion. A lot of teams will be interested in trading for Micah Parsons, but not every team could afford to trade for him. They have to check these boxes. He's going to cost a lot. He's going to cost 2 first-round picks and more picks, maybe 3 first-round picks. So teams have to have the draft capital first. Not only that, they have to be able to afford to trade those picks away. I'm mainly looking at the teams that need a quarterback or the teams that are going to need a quarterback, may need a quarterback. You can't just trade for a star pass rusher and expect to get a quarterback. You know, you're shit out of luck at that point if you trade a bunch of first-round picks in the future, especially with this very good quarterback draft class coming up. And you have to have the cap space right now and in the future. He's going to cost $24 million this year, and he wants a very, very pricey extension. He wants to be the highest paid defensive player in football, and he's going to be. He's going to be around that at least, so have to be able to afford him. So not everyone can make this deal, but a lot of teams would be interested. I have the landing spots separated in the tiers. Let's start with the dark horse landing spots, a mixture of teams that a lot of people are mentioning when it comes to Micah Parsons, and I want to talk about them, and teams that make sense, a lot of sense at first glance, but once you dig a little deeper, there's some obstacles there. The Bengals make sense in theory because they have the money to pay Trey Hendrickson. They just worried about paying him a lot because he's 30 years old. So they can afford Micah Parsons. That kind of solves that issue. And the Cowboys maybe don't want to spend an absurd amount of money. Highest paid defensive player on Micah Parsons. Hendrickson would help them and wouldn't cost that much. So in theory, you know, it kind of makes sense, but a lot has to happen here. The Bengals have to want to pay Parsons a shit ton of money. And they have to want him over Trey Hendrickson, and the Cowboys have to be good with having Trey Hendrickson and paying him. So if they agree that they like those players and they'll play those players, then it very well could happen. There's just some obstacles there. The Ravens, I mean, the roster is pretty complete. They have a little bit of spending money in the future. They're going to need to clear a little bit more. It's definitely doable. They already have Lamar under contract, but man, they could be Micah Parsons away from just being that absolute juggernaut team. They're already kind of up there. It's just a little thin on cap space. They already have a ton spent. You know, there's always ways to clear cap space. The Rams have a lot of future cap, and they have 2 first-round picks this upcoming year. I would say, you know, Stafford's not going to be around forever, so they have to kind of keep those picks, and maybe this upcoming draft class look for that quarterback of the future. But again, they have 2 this upcoming year. Could they send one of those in future picks or both of those, and they still have, you know, another future pick? Again, a lot of cap space in the future. They have pretty good edge rushers. But Parsons and Verse would be an insane duo in bolster that defense. In the Chicago Bears being mentioned a ton, and you do want to talk about them because they're not afraid to make that splash trade. That's been proven, right? And on paper, based on what they did last year, and on paper right now, looking at their roster, their depth chart, they could definitely use an upgrade at the edge position. And the issues are they're a little too low on cap space just for this year. He's going to cost $24 million. They're very thin on cap space next year because their spending spree this offseason. They have a little bit in the future after that. You know, there's always ways around, you know, clearing cap space so they could kind of make it happen. You know, they also have a big contract to Montez Sweat, and they just signed Deo Adangbo to a, somewhat of a bigger contract, bigger than people expected, and they haven't even tried him yet off the edge. They just got him this offseason. So the Bears may feel like they're set right now, and they might be a little bit too thin on cap because of their spending spree this offseason. These division rivals would make a ton of sense for Micah Parsons if they were not division rivals. It makes them a little less likely, obviously, because first off, the Cowboys have to want to trade Parsons. Right now, there's no word they do actually want to. They could get there, but if they get there, then they have to want to trade him to a division rival. And on top of that, division rivals that are contenders, that are a serious threat with the Commanders in the Eagles. So a lot has to happen here, but man, do they make sense other than the division rival part. Washington Commanders have a loaded offense. They need to upgrade on defense, especially off the edge. They have Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn was Micah Parsons' defense coordinator with the Dallas Cowboys. He's the head coach of the Commanders. He is partly responsible for Micah Parsons being Micah Parsons. I'd say Micah Parsons is most responsible for that. Obviously, give him most of the credit, but Dan, you know the Commanders and Dan Quinn are making that call. You know they are very interested. They shouldn't move on from Terry McLaurin, but if they had to pick between, if we get Parsons and move over McLaurin, I think they would do that, actually. Not that the Cowboys may not be interested in McLaurin, though, because they're set at receivers. There's only so many snaps to go around with their, they already have 2 stars. But to me, if the Commanders weren't in the same, if they were in the AFC, we'll say, they'd be that number 1 landing spot. I'd put them at number 1, top tier, most likely landing spot, or with the other teams that we're going to talk about in that category. The Eagles definitely would be up there. I can't say they would for sure be number 1. I think, Dan Quinn, the Commanders would be there, but they'd be up there because they're always looking for ways to get better. Cap space really doesn't affect that. It affects everyone, but they work around it. Number 1 is get the good players, right? Get the great players, and we can make moves. We can maneuver around it. And they could use an edge rusher. I just don't see any way. I think the Cowboys maybe more likely would trade him the Commanders than the Eagles, but probably even chances, which is very low. But, man, what if Dan Quinn and the Commanders what if Dan Quinn's like, I got to have him. Just sell the house. You sell next year, this year first, next year first, the year after that, 2nd round pick, 3rd round pick. I mean, what if they get crazy? Then maybe we'll see. And the Commanders' picks might be a little more valuable than the Eagles if we're just debating these 2 teams. But interesting to think about. I put these teams in the maybe category. Like, it's possible these teams could be interested. The Patriots have a lot of cap space for this year, and a lot of that could roll over to help them next year because of their spending spree. They're a little thin next year. But opening up in the future after that, they have space. It's not a shit ton like they had going into this year, obviously, but they can make it work. Vrabel's always going to look to make the defense better, always going to look to find star players like this. You could argue maybe they're fine because they already paid Harold Landry. They got him, and Keon White has a lot of potential, a big future. Hearing good things about him in training camp. So if you put it that way, it's like maybe not for the Patriots. The Packers have a lot of space this year. They can use that to pay Parsons now. They can have some roll over where they're somewhat thin next year. If you look deep into the future, the Packers are very, very thin, but it's the way they structure contracts. Once you get down the road in those contracts, they either move on or redo the contracts, clearing the space, so not really worried about that. If the Packers get a proven guy like this, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for more of a consistent sack artist here, what they kind of been missing. If they get Micah Parsons, I'll pick the Packers to win a Super Bowl if they get Micah Parsons. So they got to realize that. It's just some financial work needs to be done. The Packers can be a little stubborn, and they do have decent pass rushers at the same time. We'll see. The Raiders have plenty of money to spend. They could afford Parsons. And if you look at it that way, along with they have the quarterback, they have the running game they're supposed to with Genti, they have a decent offensive line. They have a star in Brock Bowers. They have a star in Max Crosby. If you look at it that way, they could afford to make this move, put him next to Max, or opposite of Max Crosby, I should say, and who gives a shit who's on the rest of that defense? Basically, that's going to be it's going to be insane. Like, you don't have to spend anywhere else. That defense is going to be absurd, and they're going to win football games because of that pass rush, because of the run game with Genti, because of Geno and Brock Bowers. So if you put it that way, it looks. Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. They do have some other roster building to do. Maybe they're worried about that. Maybe, they only want to spend X amount of dollars at that position because Crosby gets paid a ton, and, Parsons is going to need a lot more money. He's going to be the highest paid defensive player when it's all said and done. So maybe if they look at it that way, then the Raiders maybe say pass. Panthers definitely could use an upgrade at the position, even though they drafted a couple guys and they've signed a couple young guys with upside over the last couple years. So maybe they stay put. They may need to free a little bit of space this year. It's definitely doable. They're not super thin. Will they? It's going to come down to Bryce Young. Obviously he's the guy. Looked promising at the end of last year, but if they say like he's for sure, I know he's for sure their guy this year, and the staff thinks that as well. But if the staff is going, yeah, there's no question, like we're not going to need a new quarterback ever because Bryce Young is the guy next year or the year after that. If they're saying that, then boom, they can definitely make a run. They can afford to make this. But if in the back of their minds, obviously they believe in Bryce Young, but if they go, there's a shot, there's a chance we might need a quarterback, maybe there's a better guy, I'm not counting on that. But if they think that, then they better not, trade a bunch of first-round picks. So, but a team that definitely could use an edge rusher, and they'll have to free a little bit of space. And the Seahawks got a ton of space now and in the future. They could get better off the edge. They added his teammate DeMarcus Lawrence already. They do have a number of pass rushers. They may have a question at quarterback, depending on how Sam Darnold plays. It's not like a locked-in contract long-term. I know they have Milroe, but there's nothing set there. They may need a quarterback in the near future. So do you trade? It's a question. Do you trade first-round picks because you might need a quarterback? They also have to pay attention to the offensive line. Do they have enough edge rushers, like I said? So the more and more I talked, I'd say the most likely teams on this list, on the maybe list, are probably the Packers and the Raiders, and then it's just a step under Panthers, and then Seahawks and Patriots right there. But those are the maybe teams to me. The more I talk about the Packers and the Raiders, hey, possible. The most likely landing spots for Micah Parsons if he is traded, and we will talk about the Cowboys as well. But the Tennessee Titans, they check a lot of boxes. First, they have the funds. They have the space this year and in the future to pay Micah Parsons whatever he wants. Whatever he wants, they can do it. Take a look at their roster. Take a look at their defense. They actually got some studs. They got a star player in Jeffrey Simmons. They got more studs than just that. But if you look at the edge position on their roster, it's weak. It's holding the rest of their defense back. But if they add a stud at that position, boom, that defense could be legit. Parsons could help them now and in the future. It'd be a huge, huge boost to that defense. And a lot of people might say, well, the Titans shouldn't do this because this is going to be an early first-round pick this upcoming year, and they have to give up more first-round picks on top of that. It's well worth it. Micah Parsons is worth the early first-round pick. I mean, he's young. He's already elite. He's still getting better. Remember, he played a different position in college. Well worth it. And the Titans don't have to worry about picking a quarterback. They just picked their quarterback, Cam Ward, first overall. To be determined if he's actually the franchise guy. But for right now, he is. Like, they're going to, Brian Callahan's second year, that's the guy he picked. They are going to run they're going to give Cam Ward a shot, until every shot, every chance that they can give him. So he is the guy. They can afford to make a deal. They check a lot of boxes here to be able to make this deal. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, this is a really, really good roster. They don't need a quarterback. They're locked in with Baker. They don't have a lot of needs. Last year, a big need was an edge rusher. They had Hassan Reddick, but it's a one-year deal. Nothing locked in with him. No guarantees even going to be good. They have Yaya Diaby, but man, they're a Micah Parsons away from maybe being a serious Super Bowl contender, Super Bowl favorite maybe, and that's all they need. Mike Evans going to be a free agent, but they just drafted Emeka Egbuka on top of having other good receivers. Again, Egbuka's on a rookie contract. They don't have a lot to worry about. The roster's so good around it. They are Micah Parsons away. They actually have space too. They will have some spending money in the future. They can make this happen and be a scary, scary team with Micah Parsons. Chargers kind of in the same boat. I mean, this would be that much more of a contender, maybe one of the Super Bowl favorites if they add Parsons. This team has a lot of spending money now and in the future. No problem affording him, giving him whatever he wants. No problem at all. Like Tennessee Titans, the Bucs could afford him too. They're just a little bit under those teams, but they could pretty much give him whatever he wants, and they would. But the Chargers, I mean, you could say they have Khalil Mack and Tui Pelotu. Khalil Mack's got 1 year left on his deal. He signed a 1 year. Could he be retiring after this year? Nothing locked in long term with him. And Tui Pelotu's a promising young player, but there's just nothing like set in stone, locked in. They get Parsons. They're legit now. They're legit in the future. They don't have to worry about missing Khalil Mack. You actually get better, with Micah Parsons. He's currently a lot better than Khalil Mack, even though he's still balling out at his age. They have the quarterback under contract in Justin Herbert. They have a loaded roster. They have a ton of space. They check a ton of boxes. The only negative, I want to say the Chargers would be my number one, but there is one thing. It's a small thing. It's a question. No guarantee here. There's no guarantee answer that I'm giving. But this team loves the draft. They killed it in the draft last year. I feel like they killed it in the draft this year, but that's to be determined. So do they want to give up a bunch of draft picks and not be able to continue to kill it in the draft? That's the only thing. Maybe Harbaugh likes his young players that he spent time recruiting, whether he landed them or not at Michigan. He recruited them. So still a lot of those players out there, in the near future draft. So, but you could trade a bunch of first round picks and then you still have, maybe they rather trade 3 first round picks and then you have 2nd through 7th round to still kill it in the draft. You could argue that either way. And then he very well could be playing for the Cowboys this year or not traded at all. It's very rare, especially this time of the year, especially the season's about to start, for a player like this, like Micah Parsons, to get traded. So you could say maybe not likely he's traded, but at any given time, the Cowboys could just give in and be like, all right, we don't want to play this game anymore. Here's your money. You're worth every penny. We love you. We got to have you. You're dominant. You're elite. Here's your money. At any given time, boom, just like the Cowboys could do that. Or they could just refuse to trade him, and Jerry could be an asshole and be like, yeah, we're not going to give him his money until he gives in because we don't think he's going to sit out. Because I don't really see Micah Parsons sitting out, but I don't know. And they can just refuse to trade him. either or are definitely possible. So I'm not going to sit here and say Micah Parsons will be traded. But everybody wants to know with the landing spots if it gets to that point. I mean, what Micah Parsons posted sounded pretty serious. And, the comments that maybe Jerry Jones are making and how Cowboys are handling business, maybe it's just the final straw. It just pissed Micah Parsons off. So maybe eventually it gets to that point where he actually is traded, and here are your landing spots. And the more and more I was talking with you guys about some of all those other teams like the Packers, maybe the Raiders. I'd say the Packers are after these teams listed right here, then maybe the Raiders. I think it's a little more realistic on those teams, than I originally thought. But I think these teams really, really stand out if he is traded. Let me know your guys' landing spots, your predictions in the comments. If he's traded from the Cowboys, where will he go? What will the compensation be? Would love to see those interactions in the comments with you guys. But that'll do it. Loads of content rolling on those YouTube shorts as well lately, so check those out. Like, subscribe to notifications on. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.